Okay, we may get started. I can see there's a lot of people in the gallery who have just arrived, so welcome gallery. I'll go through some meeting procedures to start off with. So I'll officially call open the City of Unley Council Assessment Panel meeting for the 29th of July 2021 under very unusual circumstances is probably the best way to describe it, and I'll deal with that shortly. First of all, we would like to acknowledge that this land that we meet on today, the many lands that we all sit in our own homes, is the traditional lands of the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. Welcome panel members and members of the public. For the information of the public gallery, my name is Brenton Berman, and I'm the presiding member for the panel. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. Other members of the panel, now they are, I'll name them so that you know who they are. Colleen Dunn, if you'd like to wave, Colleen, so people know who you are. Michael McEwen, Councillor Emma Wright, and we do have one apology, which is from Ross Bater. Also in attendance from Council's administration is Gary Brinkworth, who's the Manager of Development and Regulatory Services, Don Donaldson, who's Team Leader for Planning, Andrew Rayban, who's the Senior Planning Officer, and Lily Francis, who's the Development Administration Officer. They've got their cameras turned off, so they're sitting together, I believe. I wish to stress that this is an independent panel established under the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act. While we receive advice and recommendations from Council's administration, it is the panel's task to assess applications against the City of Unley Development Plan or the new planning code and to make decisions in accordance with the requirements of the Act. Now, procedures for tonight's meeting. This is a very different meeting, and I apologise. We were scheduled to have the meeting last Tuesday night, but because of COVID lockdowns, it's been shifted to tonight and to an online meeting. So bear with us, people in the gallery. We hope we don't lose you through the process, and the technology is kind to us tonight. So just to give you some rundown of how we're going to deal with things, for each item on tonight's agenda, we'll first hear from any representatives who have lodged written representations and have asked to appear before the panel. Now, what will happen is that Lily, who's our administration person, will put people into a waiting room until the particular item that they're dealing with comes on, and then we'll bring them back to first of all hear from the representatives, hear from the applicant, and then hear the discussion from the panel members as well. So I'm just letting you know that you may go into a waiting room for a period of time until your particular application comes up. Your microphone buttons will also be turned on when it's your turn to speak. So that's Lily's responsibility. She'll be controlling everything for us, we hope. So in terms of the process, representatives will go first, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to speak, and we'll get a notice to say when the 5 minutes is up, so I'll ask you to wrap up at that stage. After that, the panel members may have questions or seek clarification. In those cases where representatives address the panel, the applicant is also given up to 5 minutes to speak, and similar process will be notified after the 5 minutes and asked to wrap up, and there may be questions or clarification from panel members. In relation to item 4 on our agenda, this is for 18A Angus Street, Goodwood, we have a recommendation from staff which is for refusal, and therefore we provide the applicant the opportunity to also speak in relation to the matter. Following the hearing of the representations and the applicant's response, the panel will then discuss the issues that have been raised, and at the end of each item make a decision through a formal resolution. And this will either be to approve, refuse, or we may wish to defer to seek further information. Just to let you know, we do have copies of all the papers, including the written representations. We've had the opportunity to read those papers, and we're aware of the issues that you've raised. So therefore, we encourage you not to read out your representation, but to highlight any key issues or concerns. And just finally to stress that these are formal hearings, and I request that everyone present respect those protocols. That's the background for tonight. We're now going to go into the formal agenda, and that starts off with conflicts of interest. Michael, I think you had a couple, was that correct?
Yes, that's right. items 5 and item 6.
No problems. And that's in relation to business relationships, or?
Yes, in both cases, projects and clients that I'm involved with professionally.
Thank you. Are there any other conflicts of interest from members? No. We then move on to confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of May. Everyone's had a chance to review those. Emma, you're happy with the minutes?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Emma's moving. Colleen, did I see your hand go up to second that?
You did.
I did, right. Any discussion on the minutes? If not, we'll put the motion, which is to approve the minutes. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So hopefully you're seeing that our hands are going up and we're dealing with things correctly in the gallery. Now we go to the first item on our agenda, which is item number 1, which is, I just want to check with administration. So is the gallery still going to be able to remain watching these proceedings and have their microphones turned off at this point in time? Don, can you clarify that for us? Or do they go into a waiting room?
They will go into a waiting room, and unfortunately we'll only be able to hear and see the discussion for that particular
item. Okay. So I apologise, people in the gallery. You will be back shortly. The first people, item 1, which is 207 Wattle Street, Malvern. So that's Neil and Leanne Hollis, and also the applicant, which is Simon Shannon and Lisa Martin. So you're the only ones here at this point in time, I believe, and everyone else is going off to a waiting room. I'll just give everyone a chance to think.
Good evening. I'm Neil Hollis. Can you hear me?
We can, Neil. Yep, no problems at all.
Great. Okay.
It's working, thank goodness. So as you heard, you've got up to 5 minutes to speak, and we may have some questions of you. So fire away, Neil.
Sure. Okay. Good evening, panel members. So I'm assuming that you've read my regional representation, so I'm just going to highlight the main concerns. And that's basically following the assessor's report that was provided as part of this agenda. So our first issue is the second-storey windows overlooking our backyard. The applicants say that they are providing privacy screening to the south-facing windows. My concern is that there are 2 windows facing south on that second storey, and the batten screening is only provided to part of 1 window. And this, I think, is inadequate to ensure privacy in our backyard and our swimming pool area in particular. We won't feel comfortable in our own backyard with the way it is. Zone Principle DC9 says that second stories should be incorporated into the roof space, and the assessor suggests that this doesn't intrude significantly on our property in this case, but I disagree. It overshadows and overlooks our property. The applicant's amended diagram showing views from the second story window clearly show that you can see into our backyard, and the battens are inadequate. I note the view shown, it seems to be from the perspective of a shorter person standing back from in the room away from the window, and I think you'd get a full view close to the window. In our view, the windows should be frosted or larger full battens across all the south-facing windows to prevent this. A second issue is the house wall on the boundary. The applicants have reduced the length on the boundary to 9 metres, but this still has a significant impact on us. 2 metres of the 9 metre wall extends beyond our carport area and will be visually intrusive. The applicant's plans are inaccurate in this respect, and they chose not to correct it when we pointed out. And I think this is misleading, as it appears to be their main argument that the boundary wall is adjacent to our carport and screening. Development plan guidelines suggest that side boundary setback should be 1 metre from the boundary, and I don't see why that requirement would be ignored here. PDC 12 says boundary walls should be avoided, but the assessor suggests it's not a significant impost on us due to our carport and privacy screening structure. And again, I disagree. The privacy structure is only 1 metre high from the carport roof to the top of the fence, and is see-through lattice, and is only for part of the proposed wall. The lattice is irrelevant anyway, as it's totally redundant once the fence is removed. Our third issue is the building height on the boundary. The proposed height of 3.77 metres from the floor will be at least 4 metres higher than our ground level from our side, as our property is lower. This wall is much higher than our carport roof, so we'll block out light to our rooms on this side and shadow our solar panels in the morning. And this is particularly a concern to us in the summer, where you get sun on solar panels from something like 7 a.m. in the morning, and that's when we're using the power. Development plan guidelines say that boundary walls should be maximum 3 metres high, and I don't see any justification why it should go above 3 metres in this case, given that it does have an adverse impact on us due to the overshadowing. The applicant's shadowing diagrams only show 9 a.m. at the earliest, and to us it will have a significant impact on our solar panels from 7 a.m. in summer, and will also mean these rooms will be quite dark in the morning when we're getting up in the morning. And just one further issue, the assessor noted that the boundary wall will be cement rendered, and we note that Hebel panels are to be used, which we understand can be high maintenance, and I point out that it would need to be rendered before being erected, as it would not be possible to access the wall from our side once erected due to the carport and lattice, and I'd query whether it's even possible to render the panel before erection. Thank you, that's all I want to say at this point.
Can't hear you.
I've just gone off mute. Thank you very much for that. Any questions from panel members of Neil? No, not at this stage. Okay, thank you for that. You just stay tight. And now, Leanne, did you write a separate representation as well?
Yeah,
to be heard? Yeah, I thought so.
It's me too. So
far away.
Okay. Thanks for allowing us time to talk. This has been very upsetting and stressful time for us, mostly because we don't feel our concerns have been listened to or addressed. Basically, I don't want a huge wall built on our boundary, as I'm sure no one would. I wouldn't do that to our neighbours, so I feel it is breaking the golden rule, do unto others. Also, the recommendations state it should be 1 metre away and less than 3 metres high. Building on the boundary greatly impacts us, not only aesthetically, but the shadowing it would cause. Yes, we do have a carport down the western side of our home, which will hide part of the extension, but as we have previously stated, the plan has been drawn incorrectly and the wall will still continue 2 metres past our carport. Being so high, it will close in on us. As we are over 60 and retired, we will have to view this huge construction daily. Our lattice, which is constantly mentioned, is only 1 metre high and only over part of the length, so it will not hide it. I do appreciate the length has been reduced to 9 metres, but shadowing over the carport, which is already dark and has some clear panels, would be a problem. Also, it would stop light, which comes in above the fence. I don't know how we could correct this, as further clear sheeting on the roof, the carport roof, will still be in shadow. We have only recently put solar panels on our roof to help cost the retirement and help the environment. Energy from these are mostly used in the morning, getting dressed and showered, etc. in the morning, cleaning, washing, cooking before going out for the day. Nearly half of these panels will still be in shade at 9 a.m. Our adjoining fence, according to survey reports, was put up incorrectly 10 centimetres on our land, so I would expect the fence to remain to protect our dog, car and safety. Also hide some of the Hebel structure, which I've read is cheap material requiring regular maintenance. Privacy from the 2 rear windows haven't been addressed at all. We swim daily through the warm weather and entertain in our backyard. The proposed battens on half of only one of the 2 windows will not stop peering eyes. Other councils would not allow this. They would require either frosted glass or only high windows. I do expect the same help from my Unley council. Thank you for your time and for this opportunity to talk to you. Sorry, I gabbled a bit.
So we can't hear you, Brent, you're on mute.
Sorry, there we go. Is that better?
Thank
I
you.
pushed the button, it didn't work. Thank you for your representation. What will happen now is you'll probably go on mute yourselves, but you'll still be able to hear all the discussions that go on. And so I'll now ask the applicants, which is Simon Shannon from ERPS and Lisa Martin from Design Studio. Simon and Lisa, if you're there.
I am. Thank you, Brenton. My apologies also. I just had a few issues hearing some of Leanne's comments. I'm not sure if that was at my end or if that was for everybody.
I think it might have been at your end.
Okay.
I was able to hear it fairly clearly, but I suppose just to summarise, and I'll open Leanne's microphone just to confirm as well. But the key issues from Leanne were in relation to the length of the boundary wall, the upper story component with the window treatment, the impact that the upper story would have on the solar panels, and the potential for overlooking of the backyard. Leanne, have I missed anything? They're the main points. And also the wall on the boundary being Hebel wall would take a fair bit of maintenance and have some concerns about that wall.
And would stand out because they say that it's going to be covered by the carport, but it's not going to be covered by the carport.
Simon, did you hear all that?
I did, thank you.
Okay. Did I miss anything, Leanne, just to confirm before we go on? You're on mute.
Can you think of anything else?
I feel like this is an advert for Kit Kat at the moment.
No, I think you're covered.
That covers it? Okay, thank you. Off to you now, Simon.
Great, thanks Brenton and panel. Look, firstly, I'd like to thank Council's planning staff and Heritage Advisor who we met with and worked with prior to lodging the application. Obviously, a lot of design consideration has gone into this proposal by Lisa, who is the applicant and the architect. Look, the neighbours' concerns we understand in relation to particularly the proposed boundary wall, the overshadowing and the overlooking. Look, in response to their concerns following the public notification period, that wall was reduced in length, and that the intent of that and where it's been reduced was really to provide a little bit more natural light where their carport is, and some of the polycarbonate or clear sheeting in the roof. So the idea there was to remove or move off at the boundary in that location. I think, look, and we appreciate that the boundary wall is taller than 3 metres, and the comments about the lattice and the location of the carport. Look, really what we're talking about is a 9 metre long wall, and that length of wall is acceptable in the Unley development plan. And it does say walls to 3 metres in height, and we are marginally taller than that at 3.7. In my view, that 3.7 metres is not unreasonable. It is not of an unreasonable bulk or scale in that location where approximately 2 metres or so extends beyond the carport. I did notice on the aerial map that was shown on the screen before is a little bit dated, and additional structures have been built at the back of the representor's dwelling that does extend to the boundary. The height of the wall doesn't lead to any unreasonable overshadowing impacts, and that's the same with the 2-storey volume. There was extensive overshadowing analysis completed during the design work. And what that shows is that at the winter solstice, at 9 a.m, there's a very small amount of overshadowing of the solar panels. And by 9:40 a.m, the proposed building doesn't overshadow those solar panels at all. Most development plans, when they talk about minimising overshadowing issues, talk about times between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. during the day. At that time, our development does not shadow those solar panels. The upper level itself will cast a shadow that extends across the representor's residence
Sorry, Simon.
until about 11
You
a.m.,
froze there.
which you can
Just
see in
wanna-
the right-hand screen. Beyond that period, there's a list. Sure, my apologies. Is that any better?
Simon, do you want to try turning off your camera? That might make a difference in terms of
Not a problem.
your internet. Apologies.
Yeah.
We know who you are now.
No worries. Look,
Thank
I'm not sure where that got to.
we missed the last bit about you talking about the overshadowing, and I think I heard that from about 10 a.m. onwards that the solar panels wouldn't be shadowed. And that's probably about the end of what we heard.
Yeah, look, at 9:40 or very close to that, the proposed development won't overshadow those solar panels. As I was trying to say, most development plans, when they talk about shadow impacts, seek to reduce shadowing between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. That's during the middle of the day. And what we have is a proposal that comfortably meets that. And in terms of the development plans test for minimising overshadowing impacts, I think that is really demonstrated by those shadow diagrams and the extent up to which either solar panels, habitable room windows, or private open space are overshadowed. I think the comments about the potential for overlooking, if you wouldn't mind showing on the screen that plan right there, thank you. What we've got there is a plan which shows the vertical battens which sort of project out from the building, providing they obscure views to the side of the dwelling, if you like. And you also see the roof of the ground floor, which is the grey towards the bottom of the picture, which obscures views downwards. The comment that this was taken from the image was a short person isn't correct. It's actually taken from 1.8 metres high, which is significantly above eye level of an average person. It's also not standing right where the window is, because there is a box seat in that location. So you're not just standing right up against that window looking out. If that image was taken straight on, what you would see is more of the garage of the dwelling to the south. But really what we're trying to demonstrate here is that there is extensive work gone in here to minimise that overlooking impact. And you do not see into that backyard like has been suggested. I might just throw to Lisa quickly on the concern about the construction and the Hebel wall and the rendering. Lisa, are you still there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one about the Hebel. The Hebel was selected because we are on the west, because of its thermal mass properties. So part of what we're trying to do is reduce, or I guess improve, our thermal properties and sustainability for our building. And we thought it also gave our neighbours the opportunity to finish that wall on their property side however they wish. The constructability is an interesting one. We are well aware that there's an existing carport structure there. So we are completing our survey of that boundary so that we can have it located exactly. And we've been mindful of that in terms of how we would progress in, how we're going to build up against that latter part of the garage, the carport, I suppose. So look, I'm happy to take on board an alternative to that element. We are looking for something with thermal mass in it, because it's a good heat sink for us on our part of the property, because the western sun hits that. But we've used the product extensively in other projects on the boundary where there's a shed up against it, and it gets pre-finished, pre-painted, and then installed from our side of the property. But does that sort of answer the question, Simon? don't know that there's, we've researched the product and have used it before and haven't had any problems with it.
Yep. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Brenton.
Thank you both. Any questions from panel members? I have one very quickly. Simon, the representatives talked about the second windows at the upper story level. And the plans don't appear to show any overlooking treatment to those particular windows. Did you just want to provide a comment about that, please?
Yeah, sure. Do you mind scrolling to the upper floor plan? No, the floor plan, sorry. If you keep scrolling up, I think.
Keep going. Keep going.
That's the one there. Yep. We're talking about the one in the sort of bottom left-hand corner there where the desk extends to. I think any potential for overlooking of the dwelling to the west has to basically be standing or sitting on that desk looking backwards. The thickness of the wall there and the inset nature of the window would make an angled view back towards that western property very challenging. I don't think there's any potential for unreasonable overlooking from that.
Thank you. Any other questions from panel members?
Yeah, I've got a question, Brenton.
Michael, yep.
Or a few questions, and just bear with me as I go through my paperwork. The first question, could you just confirm that the existing shed in the back garden is being demolished? I think it appears in one of the shadow diagrams, but maybe that's just a drawing discrepancy. The second question was about the vertical screens on the upstairs window, and maybe if you could explain a bit more about them and the materials and the size exactly, if you're able. And the third question, I'll just find my notes again.
In the meantime, do you mind if I confirm the existing shed is being demolished?
Sure.
Simon, if you start to respond to those two questions to start off with, Michael will find his third.
No worries. I will hand over to Lisa to talk about the screen, if that's okay. I know there's been a lot of thought into that, and I think that's best coming from her, if that's okay. Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about those. Those vertical blades are aluminium powder-coated vertical blades. They come in a variety of sizes, but we were looking at sort of a 50 mil to 75 mil thick to about a 250 mil wide, if that makes. So the projection from the face of our building would be about 250 millimetres, which was how they're drawn on that 3D perspective. We've just been playing around with the spacing of it, making them very small spacing closer to the western side, and then just spacing them out a little bit greater as it moves towards the east. So that was what we were proposing for the material of those blades.
Okay, thank you. And my third question, I did find my note. This was about the boundary treatment to Rugby Street, and we've got a fence above some sleepers, concrete sleepers. Are those sleepers existing, or is that all new? And could you just explain, I think there's an existing swimming pool behind there, so maybe you could just explain the fencing detail and the height and why you've done it that way.
Me, Simon?
I think so. Yes, please.
If you, Lily, is it Lily scrolling? If you don't mind scrolling to the Rugby Street elevation, I think if you keep scrolling down.
East elevation, that's it.
Yep, on there. Yes, there is an existing pool, and it hasn't been retained. There's just basically a colour bond fence along that line, upon which there's been dirt put up against that we bought the house like that. And over time, it is progressively pushing. One wintry day, one of the colour bond panels did fall down. So part of this is to address that. The pool, for some reason, is that height above, I guess, the street side of Rugby Street, but it does relate well to the levels on our side in terms of how the fall from sort of the southern boundary back towards our house. So there's a portion of that fence that we have to retain, and that retains the surface around the pool. Then above that is, I guess, what we would call our compliant level in terms of the compliance of a fence height around a pool. It also assists with, it's quite low at the moment, the current fence we have. So awkwardly, we do see the tops of people's heads, and often we get people looking over into our backyard. So it's some form of extra security, real privacy for us. We have 2 small young kids who are going to get older and use that pool a lot. So it's just a bit of exposure, but we're kind of governed really by the levels along that particular length adjacent to the existing pool.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, sorry, Simon.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to add one thing. The fence that is proposed there will match the same fence that's been constructed adjacent the ensuite on the other side of the garage.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? If not, thank you very much for your time and patience getting through this, Simon and Lisa. Now, we will start to discuss the application. You guys will go on mute. Panel members, do you need any questions, clarification from staff? Any comments? Like to discuss it further? Where are we sitting? We have a recommendation from staff, and probably it's worthwhile also noting that in the recommendations there is condition 4 proposed, which relates to the blades of the upper story living rooms to be to the reasonable satisfaction of council prior to development approval being given. Any discussion?
Just on that proposed condition, Brenton, and it says that the details are to be provided prior to development approval. Isn't that what we're here discussing now?
We're issuing development plan consent at this stage. They'll need to do their building plans and then come back with the final details. The other option that you may wish to consider is whether there's a reserved matter that says that the upper story treatment needs to be, once the upper story is built, we could then look at the council staff could look at the specific details of how it's treated. Don, did you want to comment on that as an option?
Thank you, Brenton. I think what the panel might want to consider is whether condition 4 becomes reworded into a reserved matter, so that there is the opportunity for not only approving the details of it, but also imposing additional conditions if required at that later stage. So I think the option is certainly either. I'm comfortable with a condition that calls on us or calls on the applicant to provide some greater detail and for us to sign off on those. Alternatively, as a reserved matter, we could do that as well as impose any additional conditions as a result of those details, if need be.
Yeah, just to clarify, Don, if we were proposing to include a reserved matter, we'd have to confirm with the applicant that they're happy with that to be included as part of the current. That
would be preferable, yes.
Yeah. So I'll before we ask the applicant for that question, panel members, how do you feel about this application? Are you leaning towards supporting it? If you are, would you prefer the, is there still concerns in relation to the overlooking treatment and whether the overlooking treatment could be included as a reserved matter, which will allow for council staff to look at that in greater detail once the applicant's provided the necessary information.
Brenton, I certainly support that suggestion that we make it a reserve matter with respect to the blades. I think greater detail and perhaps some diagrams to show the position of the sight lines and the overlooking and how it's achieved. I think that's appropriate to move it into there. Yeah, I'll say that for the moment.
Don and Andrew, quick question, and Gary, a question for you. Could the reserved matter say prior to occupation of the upper story, so that way the upper story of the building can be built, the upper story can be finished, and then council staff can actually go and see that there's actually an overlooking issue that needs to be addressed, but the minimum is the battens?
That's something that we actually discussed earlier about at what stage would staff want to sign off on any practical, notion of there is no unreasonable overlooking. I think there needs to be also a degree of certainty as well. So there needs to be that balance between the applicant knowing what they're getting into, as well as making sure that the overlooking is unreasonable overlooking is prevented. I think with today's technology, we can make an assessment of overlooking through 3D imaging and the like that is, I think, fairly accurate. So my suggestion would be not to necessarily wait for, just before completion of the work, but to even suggesting that it might be even prior to building approval or retaining it as suggested prior to development approval. Yep.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that.
Brenton, can I talk?
Go for it, Emma.
Hello. Look, I share Colleen's view, and I'm also happy with what Don just advised. Looking at the treatment, but also once the window seat is installed and the desk, I do feel that would, make it difficult for someone to be able to, look into the back garden. So I think, I feel comfortable with what we've proposed.
Brenton, sorry, Emma, sorry. Brenton, I was just going to say that I think from a point of view of privacy, unless the desk and the furniture around those windows is structural and permanent, I would prefer to take account of any overlooking without that being considered.
Those elements can always be removed. Yes. I was going to say the same thing.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that the issue here is, the dealing with overlooking of the adjacent neighbours is one element that we're talking about, and I think there are options which could be high sill windows, some sort of screening battens as has been proposed. It appears that the battens would achieve the appropriate effect, and if the staff can come up with some wording which relates to a reserved matter for prior to development approval being issued, that's probably reasonable. If that's the case, I'll ask the applicant, Simon and Lisa, whether if we were to support this application, a motion of that, a reserved matter would be acceptable. And Simon, you might want to explain to Lisa what that actually means.
Thanks, Brenton. Look, from my point of view, and I haven't had a chance to speak with Lisa about that, is I'm comfortable with a reserved matter in this instance. It's work that needs to be done anyway for the documentation side of things, and I would accept that. I'd accept a condition. In my view, we've got to build it as we've got approval. In either case, that'll result in that.
Thank you for that. So that deals with, well, sorry, overlooking issues. Is there any other questions of panel members of staff?
Brenton, I'm just wondering about the representative's observation about the rendering of the wall, and whether anything needs to be said about that, or whether we can rely on the applicant who has experience with this material and how the construction, whether that's satisfactory. And I'd just be interested to hear what the rest of the panel thinks.
Anyone like to have a go at that?
Yeah, I think it's a fairly low maintenance and quite a robust treatment. And I think, in fact, I think the overall proposal is quite a sensitive architectural response to the site, and even the vertical panels that we were talking about for the overlooking, I think, is quite a nice potential treatment, and the details should be confirmed through a reserve matter, but will also benefit the occupants with sun shading as well. So I don't have any concerns about the materials proposed for the western wall specifically.
I'm probably leaning the same way. I think Hebel block is actually a good building material that's been used many times. The treatment can be, as in, I think there's benefit for the applicant and the neighbours to be talking to each other about what the treatment on the neighbours' side should be prior to construction. So that's certainly something that we'd hope there'd be conversations to deal with that particular issue.
I was going to ask a question. Yeah, I was going to ask a question around that. I mean, is that something where the neighbour can say, look, we'd like it to be rendered in a particular shade of cream or whatever it was, and then that's something that the applicant would be able to have completed during the building process? Is that
probably the quick response is that because this is being built on the boundary, then there is some level of discussion with the neighbours, but the applicant receives their approval for building on the boundary, and their final material selection would be through the building rules and development approval process. But we'd hopefully encourage them to be talking to each other.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarification? Any other comments? If not, is anyone prepared to move the motion?
Yeah, I'll move in favour of the recommendation, and has the reserve matter condition been drafted?
It's on the screen now, I think, which says further details. I can't read the whole thing. Further details, including dimensions, materials, and lines of the proposed, that's better, upper level privacy screening shall be submitted to demonstrate the extent of overlooking into the neighbour's property. Should that say prior to development approval being issued?
And it doesn't need to now as a reserved matter.
Right, okay. Thank you, Don. We have a mover for the motion. Michael, do we have a seconder for that motion?
Brenton, I'll second the motion. I think this is appropriate. I'm not particularly concerned about the extent of the wall on the boundary. It's within the guidelines. I think that the applicant has been very thorough in minimising the overshadowing, and they will deal with the overlooking. And I think it sits quite well. Looks appropriate with the current ensuite. So I second the motion.
We have a mover and a seconder. Emma, did you want to say something?
Yes. Look, I was concerned about from Wattle Street that the second story was not, sort of central, but I understand the reason that the architect has done that, because that's to benefit the neighbour, and their concerns. So I'm happy with that. I'm satisfied that the overshadowing is going to be addressed, and I think that's fine. So look, I'm happy to support that as well. I think it's also this specific location. I mean, I went and had a look, and with the, you know, the closed street and everything, I think it's going to fit in fine, especially with the existing trees, you know, from Wattle Street and Rugby Street. So I'm happy to support this one.
I might finish off and just make a comment as well. On looking at the plans before I went out on site, I was concerned about the double garaging directly to Rugby Street. I was concerned about the potential of the two-storey component on Rugby Street. But again, because of the nature of the site, the characteristics of the closed street and Rugby Street, I was quite satisfied with the approach that's been taken there. I think the neighbours' concerns, you know, they've raised valid concerns. I think the applicant's been able to address those fairly well. But the reduction in the length of the boundary wall, I think, is a very important element. The fact that there's a carport running almost the entire length of the extension is important to recognise. Whilst it does project slightly beyond the carport, I don't think that impact's going to be significant. Based on that, I'm happy to support the recommendation as well. Any other discussion? If not, we have a recommendation or a motion before us for approval. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So for the benefit of the gallery people who we have, the application has been approved, and thank you for your patience and time dealing with this application. Okay, we now move on to the next item. I'll give staff a chance to turn people off. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Simon, and thank you to Neil and Leanne. Right, we now move on to the next item, which is item 2 of our agenda, 170 Fisher Street, Malvern. Do you want to get the gallery in for that one, please, Lily?
Yes, they're all in now.
All in, right. So this is an application, item 2 of our agenda, 170 Fisher Street, Malvern. Thank you for your patience sitting in the waiting room. Hope you had some nice music going on, or at least the Olympic Games going on while you're waiting. This is an application to demolish a veranda and carport, carry out alterations, construct additions on the common boundaries, including veranda, carport, outbuildings and in-ground swimming pool. This is a variation application to something previous. Now we have Tanya here. Tanya, I saw your name flash up on the screen. You have up to 5 minutes and we may have some questions of you. So are you there, Tanya?
Yeah, I am. I've also got my husband, Joe. I changed the Zoom name, but I'm not
sure.
Not
a problem. That's fine.
Just quickly, would you like us to share the additional images via Zoom before I get started?
Lily's got them on the screen. She can probably bring them up if that makes it easier.
If you can just wait one moment, I'll see. I'll have to just open up my Outlook. I won't be a minute.
Or Tanya, if you've got them there, you're welcome to share. And the applicant, Spiros, you're on the line as well, hopefully. You will be able to hear and see what's going on.
I'm not sure if Tanya can share just because of the...
Okay, we'll get you.
I can get it up.
We'll get
just
Lily
because
to
of
share
the host recommendation.
Right. Lily, can you just confirm that Spiros is there?
Yep, he's there.
He is. Yes, no worries. Great.
Can you all see that on the screen?
Yep.
Cool.
Would you like me to get started?
Go for it. Yes.
Many thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. We're grateful to be able to express our concerns about the potential impact this outbuilding will have on the enjoyment of our home. We feel it is important to do everything we can to minimise the impact this new outbuilding will have on our house. Our main concern is one of the large, dark outbuilding being erected very close to our back fence and one of impact on view and light. We are sorry that this hasn't been resolved face to face. Our neighbour has never actually approached us directly, and we only found out through official council notices. After the first notice, we were really grateful to be able to meet with our neighbour's architect over some of the concerns which were all addressed, and we thought that everyone was happy. We then learnt of a completely new design which was not discussed with us and, as mentioned, only learnt through official council notices. Therefore, despite having gone through our concerns with the architect, which were addressed, The outbuilding design has been completely altered and the location moved, but no further discussions. Originally, the architect offered to increase the fence height so that the new outbuilding would sit directly in line with the new fence and hence not be an eyesore for us. This increased fence height, which would reduce our view and light, was a compromise we were willing to make for our neighbours. The revised plan is now for the new outbuilding to be much higher, sitting above the boundary fence, approximately 870 millimetres, but apparently no more than 900 millimetres as per Chelsea's calculation. This will be an eyesore and it will cut out even more light than the higher fence, not to mention only being 1690 millimetres from our back fence and view. I'd like to reiterate that this new outbuilding is merely a storage room and steam room, and therefore we do not feel it needs to be of such great heights. I'd now like to show you some pictures of the potential issue. The first photo is our current view from our back garden facing the neighbours. The second photo demonstrates the extent of the existing rumpus room that backs right onto the shared boundary and the reason for the large bamboo plantings in order to cover this. We do not want to have to continue to grow really large trees along our boundary to keep hiding buildings as a consequence to cut out even more light. The third image is of the architect's revised plan demonstrating the side view. Just note that our garden is lower, so the buildings will loom even higher. The fourth image is the architect's original plan demonstrating the view from our garden. As you can see, the outbuilding is sitting in line with the new fence increase and not above the fence line, and therefore was not visible from our back garden. This was the plan that we had all agreed upon. The fifth image is the architect's revised plan demonstrating the view from our garden with the impact of the new taller outbuilding highlighted in red, which sits well above the increased fence line. The sixth photo is our current view with a superimposed image of the higher fence in grey and the new outbuilding in red. The seventh photo is the current view of our back garden while standing in our living room. The eighth photo is the previous photo with a superimposed impression of the higher fence in grey and new outbuilding in red, demonstrating the impact on view and light. Hopefully these photos give an impression of the potential visual impact this new outbuilding will have on our outlook and on our light, which is already limited due to the past requirement to grow tall bamboo to cover the rumpus room pitched fence. Whilst we are aware that we are the only neighbours making an objection, we are also aware that the neighbours to the west are keen for the removal of a large tree which encroaches on their block and the removal of the very large unattractive rumpus room. And the neighbours to the east are the same family as 170 Fisher, so of course there were going to be no objections. We would therefore appreciate your consideration on this matter, and one which will hopefully allow both parties to come to a compromise that is satisfactory for both. Thank you for your time, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for that, Tanya. Any questions from panel members?
Brenton, I'd just like to ask Tanya about the existing trees. Are those trees planted to conceal? I can see what the bamboo's doing, but the remainder of the trees, do you feel they've been planted in order to conceal the neighbours' buildings? Is that your feeling?
Yeah, I think that sadly they're seasonal, so they only will cover for a period of time when the leaves are up, but obviously for a big chunk of time they don't have leaves. So.
And is your feeling that if this weren't built, or if it were built with the previous application, you wouldn't want the trees there?
I think what it is as you can see that if they're in season, we might be okay. But looking at it like this, we can already see their roof and the air conditioner. So we can already see the roofs when the trees aren't in season. It's just once that building goes up, that's going to constantly be a big black building right close to our fence.
Okay, all right. Until summer, in which case they're in leaf. All right, thank you for that.
No worries.
Any other questions? Michael, Emma? No? thank you then, Tanya and Joe. I'll now hand over to Spiros. Now, Spiros, you have up to 5 minutes, and we may have some questions of you as well. So, fire away. And you have to, you're in mute. Hang on a minute. Just bear with us, Spiros. Is it Spiros's end or is it Lily's end that is causing problems?
It's not mine. It's Spiros is in
Spiros?
here. He's just not speaking.
Try. You're on mute, Spiros. Just
He's
unmute.
not on mute. He's not.
Okay. Now try.
I don't think he has any audio. I think he's trying something.
I knew we'd have this problem tonight. Take your time, Spiros. Just see how you go. No, nothing still. No. Oh. Try. Now try. Don or Lily, suggestion: can Spiros ring on a mobile phone and have that close to the your speaker? Would that work?
We could try that. Andy's going. He's looking to do something.
Brenton, I'm going to send my mobile to Spiros.
Yeah.
In a message, I'll get him to give me a call, and we'll see if we can loop it in.
Excellent.
That way.
Give it a try.
It feels a bit MacGyverish, but we'll give it a go.
We will try anything. So Spiros, you're about to get a mobile phone number. If you can hear me, you're going to get a mobile phone number from Andy. If you ring that number, and we'll try to get you so we can hear you. Unless you're any good at sign language, that's the other option. Apologies, we'll just bear with us for a little bit longer. We're hoping technology might work. Yeah, this is a good sign. He's got his mobile.
All right. No. No.
Oh.
If I'll turn my microphone.
Speak now. No.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear that, Spiros. No, unfortunately, we're having problems still.
What if Andrew unmuted himself? Then we could hear Spiros's phone call, perhaps.
Try that.
It's actually through Lily's. I think we're going to have this feedback issue if we're trying to loop it through.
I'm just, Tanya and Joe apologise for technology. What we might do, I'm wondering whether we can defer this one for 20 minutes, half an hour. I apologise to you both. See if we can get Spiros somehow connected.
I've just got him to go and try and get some headphones.
Headphones, that might help.
So he's just on his way to pick up some headphones to see if he can plug them in.
Not from office work, I hope.
No, hopefully not. So we'll just give him a minute.
Sure.
See if that might work.
There's no advertising on the City of Unley website.
Sorry, we won't talk about large retailers. Spiros, try now. Can you hear us? No.
Brenton, I'm happy to proceed. I mean, if no one has, I mean, I don't know.
If Spiros doesn't mind us proceeding with discussions, and I'll ask whether he can give us a thumbs up, we can actually discuss this matter and make a resolution without him adding any further detail to this conversation. That's an option, but that's up to Spiros.
Okay.
Andy, do you want to have that conversation with him on the phone? Right.
So he's happy for you to progress with your discussion. He was only there to answer any questions at this point. But if it was to be for a refusal, we would then want it to then come back for him to have an opportunity to present to the panel.
Okay.
As normal.
We will proceed based on that. So Tanya and Joe, thank you for your patience. I'll open up the discussion from panel members. Is there any questions, clarification you require from council staff? Any discussion you would like to have? Or would you like to move the motion in relation to this application? Emma, Michael, Colleen? Emma.
Yes, look, I'm happy to move as recommended. I do thank the representatives for you know, the detail and the images that they provided. That was really useful. However, look, with the existing tree coverage and the size and scale, I don't feel that it's an unreasonable application, and I'm happy to support it.
Michael, Colleen, did you want to add anything further?
Yeah, I agree with that view. I think the new development is relatively close to the representative house because the rear of their dwelling comes quite close to the rear of their property, but I don't think it's an unreasonable proposal.
I'll have a quick go as well. I think this is set, the outbuilding is set back from the boundary about 1.5 metres. It's a flat roof outbuilding. There's a proposal to remove the existing pitched roof outbuilding, which is a much larger roof space. So based on that, whilst the representatives have provided some excellent imagery to help us to make a decision, I don't think the impact is going to be as substantial. And I'm happy to support the motion as, the staff recommendation. Is anyone prepared to move a motion?
Brenton, I'm prepared. Feature him. I'm prepared to move the motion. I think I couldn't find anywhere in the development plan that says having buildings visible to a neighbour is something inappropriate. So I think this is entirely appropriate. It's a modest little shed, and I think the rest of the development is terrific. So I propose the recommendation.
We have a mover. Do we have a seconder for that? Emma,
I'm happy
you're
to
seconding?
Yeah.
Is there any further discussion?
Nope.
If not, I'll put the motion for approval. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. So Tanya and Joe, thank you for your representation. Spiros, we didn't get to hear from you, but really appreciate everyone's time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We now move on to the next item of our agenda, and I'll just wait for a second just to allow things to happen. Right, have we got everybody on board, Lily?
We're just working on it.
Sorry, I'll keep checking with you to make certain. Hope you don't mind.
We just need David, Nettle and Sandy.
We've got David.
Should be good to go.
We've got Sandy as well.
David and Sandy
We've got
disconnecting.
Connecting now. Okay, just bear with us for a minute. Oh, Sandy's there. Great. Okay, thank you everyone for your patience. I hope I'll keep on saying that you got to watch the Olympic Games while you're on hold. So this is item 3 of our agenda. This is an application for 30 Young Street, Parkside, to carry out alterations to an existing dwelling and construct a new dwelling in the Conservation Zone Area 2. We have one representative, which is David Nettle, and we have the applicant here as well. David, you have up to 5 minutes if you'd like to start your representation, and we may have some questions of you. Now, just hold off, we've got to get you off mute. Now you're good to go.
Good. Can you hear me?
Yep, no problems at all.
Yeah, so my name's Dave Nettle. So I live at 26 Young Street, Parkside. I've been living in Parkside for about the last 6 years. And just some background for me, I have cancer and a brain injury, which means I have aphasia. So you have to bear with me because I sometimes forget words. So I hope I can go okay with it.
Take your time, Dave.
Yeah. So I just want to talk about 2830 Young Street, the development. And I just wanted to sort of start off talking about that it was in the residential historic conservation zone, which is part of why I wanted to be there. So it's an old part of Parkside that I really love. My representatives, I have sort of 3 main concerns that I wanted to go talk to about. One was the building height, one was the overshadowing, and one was the car parking. So all 3 of them for me, I think are pretty significant variations from the development plan. And I've sort of kind of surprised that it was developed with no amendments at all. So I'm just going to go through each of them. So the first one was the building height. So there's two significant variations from the guidelines. One is the building wall heights should be around 3.3 to 3.5 meters. This proposal is 5.5 meters. So that's 3 meters higher than the proposals. So that's, for me, that's very significant. The other one was the roof height. So it shouldn't be, in total, shouldn't be over 5.7 meters, but the proposal is for 7.5 meters. Again, a lot higher, significantly higher. And because of having both of those, you end up having a massive bulk out the back. And I've tried to show on page 148 and 149, just a bit of an idea of what my backyard looks like. So basically, instead of seeing outside, all of my backyard is going to be walls, and very high walls. And I just wanted to also make a note that the guidelines, the new guidelines are only going to be allowed to have one story. So that means that any new buildings around here, this is going to be completely dwarfed by anything else, because it's going to be much, much larger than anything else. And that kind of gets me to my second point, which was about overshadowing, which is obviously very related. So the development plan says that it should enable direct winter sunlight into the dwelling and open spaces. So the proposed development really affects all of the windows on my house, and also both my front and back garden. So at the moment, I haven't seen any shadow diagram to what it's going to look like, but what I've seen, it seems like it's definitely going to sort of change it, very significant. And I'm actually really worried about it. I'm a gardener and I live at home, and I'm really, frankly, really worried about it. And there's no diagrams provided so that I can understand what it is. The third one, which is the last one, which is about car parking. So from what I can see, it doesn't adhere to the development plan. So development plan just generally around here is at a premium, because you got Parkside Primary, and we just recently lost 5 car parks because of the crossing. And then there's also, there's the school and also Glen Osmond Road, which means that it's actually very hard to park around there. So from what I can see, the proposal at 28 Young Street is for 2 off street, whereas it should be 3 from the guidelines. And from 30 Young Street, sorry, it should be 2, and there's actually none. So in other words, there's only 2 of the 5 spaces that should be required. So that's, again, that I just think is something that I would have thought needed to be sort of talked about. And then I just wanted to summarize. So my conclusion is that I'm all for the development, but I think we could do something a bit more to maintain and enhance the historic sorry, I'm trying really hard.
Take your time, you're right.
The historic integrity of the neighbourhood. So in other words, it's a really old part of and I want it to stay like that. So I think there's some little things that could be done that could make a big difference for how it being part of the whole neighbourhood. And I want it to be, but there's just, basically, I'm just asking for a little more closer to compliance of the development plan, pretty much regarding the height, the overshadowing, and the parking. And basically, I love this area and I love this community. And I hope the panel can see that there's some pretty minor alterations of the proposal that could minimize the sort of the bulk and the height, and also kind of frankly some minor changes could make a big difference of the mental health and well-being of nearby neighbours. And thank you.
Thank you very much, David. You did very well. Get through it. Any questions of David?
Brenton, I have one. David, what room do you have in the northwest corner of your house, which will be?
Where do I live?
What room is that? Is that your living room or?
Oh, so basically, I can't see, but at the front is my bedroom. And then I'm a painter. So the next room is I paint, so about there. And then the next room is a study, which I use like basically now for things like this, and doing my speech pathology. And then there's one more, which is out the back, which is like there's a small living room.
Okay. Have you got a pergola on the back there or a veranda or something?
Yeah, so that there is a pergola.
Right, okay.
Oh, sorry, that one, sorry.
Yeah, that bit back there. Yes, yeah. Okay. All right, thank you for that.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
I've got a question for David. Thanks for the presentation. Just a question about your back garden area, which is north facing. Is it currently quite open and you get a lot of sunshine at the moment, or do you have
so like shade? At the moment right now, the main bit of light I get is sort of this part. So this is a good picture of it actually. So basically there's some huge trees. I don't have this on here, but like looking at probably the end of it, there's like, that's the very edge of a very large tree, like a big old tree. So for example, when I put out my clothes after, like there, exactly, the main bit that I get the light for it is in that bit of garden just through there.
Okay, I think I understand. There's some trees on the northern edge of your garden, but it's more open to the west, I think is what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry, that was a better way to put it.
Well, that's all right, thank you.
Thanks.
Any further questions of David? If not, thank you very much for your time. You'll go on mute now, but you'll be able to hear the discussion that goes on. Thank you. I'll now ask, I've got Sissy Zhang and Matt Falconer and Alex, Sandy Wilkinson. So who's going to speak? Is it Sandy? Yep. Off you go, Sandy. I think you know that we can hear you.
Yep.
You've got up to 5 minutes and we may have some questions of you.
Okay, thank you. So we've got Sissy Lou and her husband who are going to be living in the new house, who can take any questions, and Matthew Falconer is the planner who's done an independent report assessing it. Just going through David's issues. Firstly, the reason why there haven't really been any amendments is because being a planner, being qualified in architecture and planning, I've gone to great lengths to design it to be compliant with the intention of the development plan in the first instance. So to that end, we have sited the upper level within the roof space and as far back as possible. The front section where the walk-in robe and ensuite is literally in the attic. And then in the upstairs section, the pitching point of the ceiling is only 2100 on the eastern side. So we've done that to keep it as low as possible and to design that upper level within the roof space as sought by the development plan. And this was lodged under the development plan. And the gutter height of the proposed two-storey section is only 1200 higher than the gutter height of David's actual house and the house at the front. So what we've carefully done is got the wall height and the ceiling height in the front part of the building, that front room, to match the ceiling height of the cottage that's being renovated on the west, and the adjacent houses, including David. So that's got the high ceilings to match those, and then it steps down to a 2.7 metre ceiling for the back part of the house, and then with the upper level done within the roof. And then we've also done the sort of curved barrel vault roof, which also just helps lower the apex of the roof slightly. And then we've taken that masonry wall height from the gutter height at the front and carried that through. And then we've recessed the upper level slightly and gone to a recessive dark grey colour metal cladding upstairs, again to visually recede. So the graphic that David showed with the white thing doesn't really quite convey how that would actually look, because you would see that masonry blockwork at the bottom and then a dark grey horizontal striated finish at the upper level. Then in terms of overshadowing, my understanding of overshadowing principles since I've been a planner and since 1992 is that if a property gets northern sun to one principal room, being the north-facing living room at the rear, that is what the, having that room, that living room in the northwest corner that Colleen asked about, as long as that living room receives 2 hours of sun between 9 and 3 in the middle of winter, that's what the measure of in terms of planning things. So in my experience, where a development is to the east or west of a development, it's not having any impact on the direct northern sun into a property. I acknowledge that in the later afternoon, there would be shading effect on those west-facing windows of David's property, but I think that's hard to avoid. But that northern aspect is not interfered with, and the back wall is 6 metres off the back boundary, and David's tree there, which is lovely, is a deciduous tree which lets the winter sun come through. Then finally, in terms of the car parking, the cottage on the left is a contributory item. It's currently on 2 separate titles, so there are lots of cottages like this in Parkside, which are single-fronted cottages that don't have parking. I don't know what happened, whether there was a matching cottage next door that at some stage was bought and demolished to build the rather unfortunate double garage to the street, which you can see in the existing photos of what's there, and you can see in the satellite view. That obviously detracts from the historic character significantly, that garage, whilst it does provide parking. So the cottage on the left is on a separate title, and that could be sold as is without any parking. But what we have done is design the garaging in such a way that we've been able to reduce the width of the crossover and gain an extra on-street car park. So we gain a net car park on the street, as well as providing 2 cars for the new dwelling, which is much as really can practically be achieved without resorting to car stackers, etc. So I think that that covers the thing off. We've really, as a heritage specialist myself, I've designed the building to complement the historic character in a contemporary way. It's got a bit of a Glen Murcutt sort of influence on it, but it's intended to match the ceiling height, the eave and gutter height that's prevailing in the street, the roof pitch form, and have a similar degree of detail without being in an imitative way. So it's done in a contemporary manner to complement the existing cottages and the other houses. And we've set the new dwelling slightly back further from the existing cottage on the site. And then we've aligned our garage for the new structure to align exactly with David's existing carport on the boundary to minimise the impact there. And then further whilst this doesn't affect David, on the other side where we've built onto the boundary, we've actually got cabinetry for the television and the laundry with a lower ceiling height, so that wall on the boundary there, which partly overlaps brick garage on the boundary, is only 2.7 metres higher than ground level on the western neighbouring side, which is as neighbourly as we could do that. Sandy,
I might get you to start wrapping up there.
Yeah, well, I think that's covered everything. We've really tried our best to be as neighbourly as we can and complementary to the historic streetscape. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of Sandy from panel members?
I have a question or two questions.
Fire away, Michael.
Thanks, Brenton. Thanks, Sandy, for the overview. The first question is a question I asked of staff earlier this week, and I know the staff love my questions, but you did point out, Sandy, that the property is on 2 titles, which does provide, I think, a really good opportunity for a sensitive infill development. And I was just curious that both the new dwelling and also the extension to the existing dwelling both overhang to some degree the neighbouring property. And I was just curious why the design doesn't attempt to keep each building within its property, noting that they are currently in the same ownership, but that could change in the future. And it did seem to me a bit unusual that the buildings didn't quite fit within the 2 properties that are there at the moment.
Yes, thank you for that question, Michael. That was a very deliberate design thing. And if you see a note on the ground floor plan, it says new easement for eaves overhang. So the intention is that there'd be a adjustment to the titling to provide a 300 eaves overhang. And the reason why I've done that is it's obviously we need to be able to fit a garage where you can open the doors without hitting the fence or the building and fit a room. And walls have to be either on the boundary or 600 mil or more off the boundary. So what you might often see is a wall on the boundary with a truncated roof, which looks very ugly when you see just a brick wall where the eaves just been cut off because it can't overhang the boundary. But we've got the opportunity here, because the client owns both properties, to actually orchestrate the titling so that we can have the eave overhang, so that when you look at the new infill building, it actually has a matching 300 eave to match the existing houses adjacent on both sides, rather than having it awkwardly cut off. And we've tried to match the width of the cottages. And the existing cottage has done that in a way that you wouldn't be allowed to do today, whereby the western wall of the existing cottage is actually a foot inside the boundary, which is why the wall steps at the rear. So it looks like it steps onto the neighbouring property at the back, but in fact, the western neighbour actually effectively gains about 300 mil of extra driveway width, because the existing wall is inside the boundary there.
Thank you. That's very, very kind of them to lend that driveway space to the neighbour. My second question was about landscape, and I did note, I think there's some perhaps small trees removed from the rear gardens of the property through the development, and there's also some landscaping that's indicated in the plans around the rear and potentially the side boundary, but it wasn't very clear what that landscape treatment might be. And thinking partly of the representative's comments about the bulk and scale of the proposed building, can you maybe elaborate on what the proposed landscape treatment is along the sides and the rear?
Yes, thank you, Michael. We haven't specified specific species other than with respect to the request of council to changed the street trees to crepe myrtle, which are planted further down the street. The existing bottlebrush tree blocks the lovely gable of the contributory item and also blocks the view of the lovely church across the road from within that house. So we've asked for council to look at replacing that tree with 2 crepe myrtle trees to match some ones which have already been planted in the street further down. Within the property, we've shown hedging plants along that western boundary, which might be either something like a Morea hedge or bamboo along that side, if that clarifies. And then we've got provision for a tree, some bushes in the back garden. So we've got a paved area where the under the balcony and where the covered outdoor area is for the outdoor dining, and then a lawn, and then we've got a strip of garden bed. So we haven't nominated particular species, happy to have a condition or reserve matter covering planting selections if that's considered appropriate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I might ask one quickly. Oh, Colleen's about to. You go first, Colleen.
Well, just with respect to that, the slot down the side, where do the rubbish bins live, Sandy?
There's room, there's some storage at the back of the garage, so there's some room there. And there's a door at the back of the garage there.
Yep.
So there's an opportunity to put some bins in that first section. There's windows there, so I would have the bins aligned so you're not looking at them from inside the house. Yes, just there, that's right.
So the front door is that door to the south of the garage, is that about right?
No, it's not. The front door is forward of the garage.
Yeah.
And there's an awning. There's an awning. It's an extension of the carport. It doesn't actually show very clearly on the ground floor plan. It shows on the first floor plan. We've got a portion of the roof of the garage steps forward. There we can see it steps forward to provide shelter to the front door. So it's a design technique which I've employed so that we get the gable with the sort of box window to the street like the existing cottage has got. Yeah. Where the existing cottage has got a veranda leading down to the front door, that's where we've got the carport. So we've positioned the carport further back and then got that front door with the roof over it. Side return.
Yeah.
So that's, you enter into a formal living room with a high ceiling.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
The ceiling drops as you go from that front room into the passage.
All right, good. Thank you.
Sandy, I have about 3 questions for you.
Sure.
First one, just taking Colleen's point about rubbish bins. You described the rubbish bin storage area for the new dwelling.
Yeah.
What happens with rubbish bins for the existing dwelling? Are they going to go down that side area?
Yes. Can you see the side gate there?
Yep.
Just where the marker is? That's where the bins would go for the existing dwelling.
No worries.
Yeah.
Second question relates to the easement for the eaves overhang. And I'll ask staff this one, they may wish to consider it, but there's no note or condition on the, I think there's a note about building on the survey boundary, but if there's an eave shown, the actual survey would have to be amended as part of, well, may not be as part of this application, but there would need to be an amendment to the survey, the title boundaries to actually show that.
Yes, we would be looking to amend the titles to formalise that.
And I would think that, and this is just a suggestion to staff while we're talking to Don and Gary and Andrew, whether we should have something either as a condition or a note on the, if we were to support this application, which actually deals with that particular issue.
Yeah, that would be quite appropriate and fine by us to have a condition or note to that effect.
And the third question relates to the fact that the existing dwelling will have no on-street or off-street car parking. Do you want to clarify with me how that, or explain to us how that's going to work? Is this going to be a house that's sold with no car parking? What do you do with it? How do you, car parking in this section of Young Street, from what I can see, is an absolute premium. On-street car parking. can you give us some background how that's actually going to work?
Yes, sure. So as I mentioned before, we're narrowing the crossover to enable an additional car park on the street. And there are lots of historic cottages that are not allowed to be demolished in Parkside that have no off-street parking. And this is one of those, and it's on its own title. And in those circumstances, people seek a residential parking permit. And I think it would be entirely appropriate for that historic cottage. It wasn't not allowed to be demolished, to have an on-site parking permit.
Okay.
And the
Thank
new
you for that.
dwelling got 2 car parks provided on site.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, can I follow up on Colleen's question about the front door of the new dwelling? So if I understood correctly and looking at the plan, the door comes into the lounge room?
That's correct, yes.
And that's effectively from the second car parking space. I can't quite see the dimensions, but can you confirm that there's enough room if there's a car parked in that second space? Is there enough room to get in and out of the front door for a resident? Is there reasonable access into the front? How does that work?
So there's a car indicated within the garage, and you can see the dimensions of that car, and you can see the space between that car and the wall. So that's about 2 feet of space. So it's that order of space if there's a car parked there.
2 feet, so that's about 60 centimetres?
That's right, yeah.
Hope you don't have too much shopping.
And not have a wire screen door on the dwelling either, opening outwards.
Yes, no, that would just be an inward opening solid door. The minimum width in the development plan and the planning code for single garages is only 3 metres, which I personally think is not workable. So we've made that garage wider than that.
Sandy, can you confirm the width of that garage? I'm measuring off the plan. I don't know how accurate this plan is, but it looks
well, actually, no, it is
somewhat less. It's about 2.7 metres.
Yeah, it's actually scaling at 2.8. Yeah, I thought it was 3 metres. Sorry.
That's going to be tight. Thank you. Michael, any further questions there?
No.
Emma, Colleen, any further questions of Sandy? If not, thank you very much, Sandy. You'll probably go on mute now, and we will then discuss this application. And David's still listening intently. I got a thumbs up, that's a good sign. Right, over to panel members. Do you need any clarification from staff? Any further information that's required? Any comments in relation to this application? I'm going to kick it off just to get things moving. I've struggled with this one. Probably is the best way to describe it. I acknowledge there are 2 titles on the site. I acknowledge that the existing dwelling is built over the 2 titles, and the garaging for the existing dwelling is on the second title. And what this means, in order to achieve this development, it means that a loss of garaging, a reduction in the size of the site for the existing dwelling, and the development plan talks about 14 to 18 metre frontages for dwellings in this section of the zone. Notwithstanding that, it's been very well designed, and it's really squeezing a second dwelling on a site. There are other dwellings within the immediate locality which are about the same width in terms of frontage. And as Sandy pointed out in his response to the representations, that this section of Young Street does include a number of cottages and smaller fronted dwellings. That's my opening statement. I don't know where I'm going to go yet, but it has both pros and cons. The one problem I do have is the lack of car parking, on-site car parking for the existing dwelling, and the narrowness of the car parking for the new dwelling, the extent of building deep into the block in terms of the two-storey component and the potential impact on the neighbour. But it's been very, very well designed. That's probably where I'll leave it, and ask other members any comments, clarification. Emma.
Look, I saw this design and I instantly loved it. So that's so bizarre and quite opposing. I thought this was a really well designed improvement and a great, infill space. I feel that it's a positive addition to the street and a vast improvement from what's there now. There's been some talk about car parking. I'm not concerned about that because of where the crossover is. It's created the two spaces on street, but there's the opportunity for a permit if it was required by the owner of the resident, the property to the left. Because I know there are limitations for new builds. You can't apply for permits if you don't have on-street parking. But I mean, this building's been here since 1910 or something like that, so that shouldn't be impacted by that. The other thing is, the city fringe suburbs, so Goodwood Parkside in particular. Not everyone has a car, and we've got fabulous walking and cycling infrastructure, and really promoting that and further developing that in the city of Unley. So, it may be that whoever does move into that property may not need a car. They might be cyclists or walkers or use other, share cars and things like that, or may have one car which they could potentially apply for a permit. So look, I'm in support of this application. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you. Colleen or Michael?
After you, Colleen.
Thanks, Michael. I really appreciate the contextual design of the new dwelling. I think it will fit very comfortably into the streetscape. And I'm not concerned about the fact that these are both quite narrow sites. I think that the fact that the sites have existed for such a long time suggests that, there was probably another skinny house in there originally. So in that respect, I think it's fine. And I think that Sandy's done really a really clever job with the face of this. I am of the opinion that the overshadowing is acceptable. The rear of the new dwelling, the shadows will start to be cast sort of from 1 o'clock onwards. I did a little sketch of this and thought, well, that's still okay under the Act. It is behaving as it should. What does trouble me is the mass of the rear of the new dwelling. Those two back bedrooms are very big, and really, I mean, I would have thought unnecessarily big, in that the rest of the house is quite neatly fitted into the roof space. But at the back, those have expanded much wider than the rest of the building. And they're just enormous rooms, which I think if they could be reduced in size would actually reduce the overshadowing and would reduce the bulk to Dave to the east. So I'll let it sit at that for the moment, and we'll hear what Michael has to say.
Thanks,
Colleen. Thanks, Colleen. And look, I agree. I think there's a lot of merit in the design, which is respectful of the context, but also contemporary, not a copy. I think we've probably focused in our discussion around some of the details, and in a tight site with a relatively large building, or in fact 2 buildings, the details do matter. And I wonder if some of those details, such as the location of the front door to the new dwelling, may have been secondary to some of the considerations, such as the appearance and the facade. And although it is a bit of a tradition to have narrow, unworkable driveways in Parkside, and I've got one of them myself, maybe it's not optimal for a new building to be quite so squeezy, and maybe there can be a slightly better design there. I'm also not worried about the lack of parking with one of the dwellings. I think it's okay to have some housing options that don't necessarily have a car park, and it is a very accessible location close to lots of services and the city. Look, I hope the City of Unley don't chop down the existing mature trees in the street and replace them with small crepe myrtles. I know that's a bit of a practice around Unley at the moment, but maybe that needs to be rethought more generally, but is not really the subject of this application. I think overall, I think it's a very strong proposal, and there are potentially a few details that could be finessed to make the buildings even more functional, and perhaps the relationship to the neighbour slightly better. And whether or not they are material enough not to approve the application is perhaps the question.
Thank you, everyone. Is there anyone, I suppose, just to clarify as well, as I've said in the past, our job's not to design. We can approve, refuse, defer. That's our role. If there are elements which are concerning, then I would recommend the deferral. But if not, if it gets across the line, then we should be supporting it. So that's the process we're faced with. Quick question of staff, if I can, and just raising this issue, if we were to approve the application, the easement for the Eames overhang, is that something that needs to be, I noticed there's a note about buildings along boundaries being done by a licensed surveyor, but there's no details about the requirement to amend the title to allow for that easement to occur. Don, did you want to comment on that? You're on mute, Don.
Sorry, Brenton. Yeah, there will need to be some adjustment to the land division. So therefore an additional note could be included to that effect regarding the adjustment to the boundary that takes into account the easement. I think Andrew has drafted something that we can show you. Where is it? Oh, sorry.
Can't rush Lily. Good see land business for the proposed easement shown for plan. Right. Thank you.
Brenton, can I just comment? You're sounding more muffled than you were earlier.
Sorry, I've done nothing. But
no, that's clear again. Thank you.
Is that better? My microphone might have moved. I apologise. I think I've spent most of the day on these headphones. So. Is anyone prepared to move a recommendation? Emma, is that as recommended with the addition?
I'll just quickly read
of the
that.
note?
Yeah, look, I'm happy to move, yeah, as recommended.
Do we have a seconder for that? Tony and Michael are both very quiet.
We're waiting for you to jump.
Yeah, I'm prepared to second that motion. I have debated this one in my head so many times, and I've been out on site. I have looked at the impact on the neighbour, and I think it just gets over the line, is probably my take on this application. But it's very well designed from a streetscape perspective. It's very well designed in terms of capitalising on the two sites. There's a large development at the rear, as was mentioned previously. But I don't think it's going to have it will have some impact on the neighbours, but whether it's sufficient to warrant refusal, I don't think it is. So based on that, I would second the motion. Is there any further discussion? If not, we have a motion for approval. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? So for the benefit of both gallery and the representative, the application has been approved in its current form. Thank you everyone for your time tonight. It's been a long night, very challenging night, and really appreciate everyone, the professionalism and the way things have been handled. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item. This is, I'll wait to allow everyone to get things together.
You're still a bit muffled, Brenton.
Is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Right. I will not move my microphone or my head.
I think that we've got Graham and Adriana. Yeah, okay. So everyone's in now.
Okay, welcome Graham, Adriana. We're on item number 4 of our agenda. It's your job to give us updates on what's been happening in the Olympic Games as we've been on hold. So hopefully we've won more gold medals. That's the only thing I can say. This is an application for 18A Angus Street, Goodwood. It's to construct a single-storey dwelling, including front fencing and garage on common boundary. It's in the residential streetscape built form zone. The recommendation from staff is for refusal, and as such, we allow the applicant up to 5 minutes to speak to provide us with some background on the application and to provide information. I will hand it over to Graham and Adriana.
Thanks very much, presiding member. Can you all hear me?
Yep, very well.
Well done. Can't report too much on the Olympic Games. There's a few heats on the swimming and that's about it, but all looking good there. I won't waste time going through all of that. Look, I really just want to, and I do want to speak because I think it's important to appreciate that what's before you this evening, is the product of substantial amendments along the way since I've come into the scene. The plan that's now before you, I think, is deserving of approval, and I think that's deserving of approval not only because it complies, in my view, with what the development plan says, but I think when you look at the site, as I'm sure you've either seen it either digitally or on your own view, the site is now vacant, but it was previously occupied by a 1960s, 50s, 60s style dwelling that clearly wasn't consistent with other dwellings in the immediate locality. More to the point, this site is the subject of a land division, I don't know how long ago, whereby the subject land is not regular in shape. And it's not regular in shape because at some stage in the past it was divided to allow or to facilitate the development of the 2-storey residential flat building directly to its east. So that dwelling, the residential flat building, is to the rear of an irregular shaped allotment, and at the front of that allotment is a carport structure. Our allotment is, if you like, a mirror image of that, but in reverse, where the wider part of the allotment is at the front and the narrower section of the allotment is at the rear. So it's an unusual and irregular shaped allotment. So we have to deal with that. The applicant, through her designer, Oakford Homes, have to come up with a dwelling that suits the specific circumstances of this allotment. And I don't believe sufficient regard has been paid to that particular circumstance in the report that's before you tonight. We cannot simply push this dwelling back and back and back, as I think has been urged by the report author, because of the way in which the allotment doglegs. The half, the 50% rear half of this allotment is only about 8 metres wide, as you'll see from the site plan. And my client, Adriana, is very, very keen to use that rear narrow section for sustainable, a sustainable garden. And she's made that submission in her own words to the council. So, and thanks for bringing that image has come up and gone again. That's it. I'm glad that image has come up too, because you can see the position of the old dwelling that's now been demolished. You'll see too on that image, an old, I presume, Google Earth view, that the dwelling that existed on this allotment already sat forward of the carport on the right-hand side, the carport of the two-storey residential flat building, and forward of the single-storey dwelling to the west on the left-hand side. That's as a result of the way in which the allotment's being configured. We can't change the shape of the allotment. We don't own the allotment to the west that's been had the residential flat building built on it, so we've got to deal with what we've got. To keep pushing the dwelling back further and further is physically impossible. Now you might say, well, why don't you come up with a design that fits the shape of the allotment? That could be done, but that, as I said a few moments ago, doesn't suit my client's desire to be able to use as much of that rear yard, the 8 metre wide section of the rear yard of this allotment, for sustainable garden purposes. And nor do I think it's necessary when you're looking at that particular image in front of you, Google Earth, which simply shows the existence of a single-storey dwelling forward of the buildings either side of it, indeed forward of all buildings in that picture of that side of the streetscape on the northern side of Angus Street. The other concern that seems to be raised about this application is the impact of what will be the boundary wall of the double garage. Now that boundary wall of the double garage will sit on the boundary shared with the residential flat building site, and more particularly shared with the carport that's forward of that building. So it's a very odd situation, I know, in the streetscape, but be that as it may, that is the immediate locality that we're dealing with here. And I would suggest to you that that's the circumstance that you should be taking into account when considering the merits of this application. The carport next door will stay where it is. Our garage will sit on the boundary shared with the position of that carport. You can see the carport, the garage in the floor plan now, but you can't see the position of the carport. But you can take it as read from the site plan, and not the floor plan, that you'll see the relationship of the garage to the carport. The garage, furthermore, has been set back from the main face of the dwelling. So it's not as if the garage is going to be dominating the streetscape. It is set back not only from the dwelling, but I think it's set back 8 metres or thereabouts from the road. Now, I know that there was also concern in the report about, and I find this odd that this concern was raised, a concern about the fence that's now shown on the plan. And again, that fence was added after I was brought into the matter. And the fence has been designed very carefully and deliberately, and I think you'll see the detail of that, and I prefer you saw that detail on the streetscape. Thank you. You'll see from the streetscape elevation the detail of the front fence. A pier and a horizontal slatted fence so that it's see-through. You'll see that the height of that fence, the sliding gate at the front, matches the height of the fence immediately to the west or on the left-hand side of that image, and matches also, in fact, it's slightly lower in height than the brush fence to the immediate west, that is east, the fence that screens the two-storey residential flat building. Frankly, I think the concerns have been raised about the fence. I couldn't understand them at all. I think that fence that's shown before you is entirely appropriate, again, for the circumstances of the site and the immediate locality. And I might point out that a couple of doors to the east, there's a new detached dwelling built, I would say, in the last 2 to 3, maybe 4 years, I don't know when, but very new. Thank you. The cursor is hovering over that dwelling now, and the next one immediately to its east, again at number 14. And I note that there was some criticism about the appearance of that dwelling as viewed from the street. I don't know what that concern was about with respect to either of those dwellings, but the number 14 Angus Street dwelling, I think there was some criticism in the report about that. In my view, that dwelling is exactly what the development plan is looking for in the street. Now, I've been doing this for a long time, and I do have some understanding of streetscapes and what is sought by a development plan and by a planning policy when it comes to streetscape compatibility with streetscape. The dwelling is not replicating the heritage aspects of the locality, but it certainly is complementary to and supportive of the features of the policy area, I'll call it, this particular policy area that's enunciated in the development plan. Although this is not relevant, what I think is worth bearing in mind is that if you were to look at the code, and I'm not suggesting you can and should be doing that as part of the assessment of this application, the new planning and design code puts this proposal in an even stronger position than it does under the existing development plan. As I said, I'm not going to go through the analysis as to why I've reached that conclusion, but I certainly made an assessment of the code as part of my research tonight. So
Graham, I'd like to get you to start wrapping up if you can.
Yep, thank you, Brenton. I will certainly do that. I pretty well finished what I do want to say, but I think, and I hope you've also got now a full schedule of the colours and materials that the report was critical of that. Those materials I thought had been provided earlier. They hadn't been. I have provided them now, and I hope those details have been provided. So, Brenton and members of the panel, happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions from panel members? I'm saying no. Emma, Michael?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Thanks, Graham. Just on the streetscape character, and maybe a couple of items from the design that at face value might not appear to fit within the streetscape, might be the double garage of the proposed dwelling, and arguably the dark grey roof. And we've talked in this panel previously about roof colour and sustainability, but also I guess the colour and form of the roof is a part of the streetscape character. Could you comment on those two aspects?
Yes, happy to. I made a few comments a few moments ago, Michael, about the garage. The garage, as I said, has been set back from the main face of the dwelling, and I think it does sit comfortably in relation to the bulk and scale and the design of the dwelling. It's not dominant in terms of its overall width. It features now a roof shape that's got a gable, Dutch gable feature as well to match the gable shape of the roof. Again, the roof shape has been amended substantially to accommodate the planner's earlier concerns. But the garage too is set back from the main face of the dwelling. And it's not the only double garage in the street. Number 14, again, Angus Street, as I was talking about a few moments ago, also includes a double garage. And I think it fits very comfortably with the streetscape. As I said, the image that's before you now, the streetscape elevation, provides a closure across the frontage in front of the garage with a double gate, a sliding gate supported with two columns either side, and a sliding gate that's no higher than the fence itself. In that context, together with the street tree in Angus Street, and that's shown graphically on this streetscape elevation as well, together with trees either side in the street and in the rear yard of the two-storey residential flat building. I think when you look at this image in context, in that broader context, the garage recedes into the behind the streetscape view. It is not dominant, it's not forward of the main face of the dwelling. Just very quickly on the colour of the roof, I think I'm not privy to the comments that have been made by this panel about previous applications, but if there is a concern about monument, which is the dark grey, of course, I'm sure my client would be happy to go for a lighter shade of grey for the roof. More than happy to adopt it. Do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Emma, Colleen? No?
Hello. Look, I'm concerned about the double garage too. I mean, if and also the monument. I'm just I suppose when I was reading through all of this, and I am familiar with the the site. I'm the Goodwood Ward councillor, so I'm very familiar with Angus Street. And I suppose initially, like I was just quite happy with the recommendation from council, and like I appreciate the detail that you've gone into in the discussion, but I suppose there's nothing that has really changed my mind. I suppose I'm just sharing that with the panel.
Okay, no questions there. Graham, the only question I'd have, it relates to the front facade elevation, and yeah, the floor to ceiling, so the large floor windows, the double garage, the roof treatment there. That's the part that I'm struggling with at the moment from a consistency or fitting in with the streetscape character. I acknowledge the comment you made about the setback of the previous building, the setback of the carports to the flats next door, but I'm struggling with just the actual appearance from a streetscape perspective. Can you give me some guidance on that, please?
Again, thank you, Brenton. Yes, I can. The original design had a facade that was quite substantially different from this facade, so it has been amended to expose the roof, to expose the gutters, to provide a facade that's in keeping, I think, more in scale and with the detailing of the facade elsewhere. It doesn't replicate other facades, nor should it do that. And also, I think the render, the colour of the render, the main face of the facade door, the garage door, the roof. I think those colours are entirely acceptable approach. Said a few moments ago, Brendan, there will be also.
Sorry, it's cutting in and out. I'm sorry, I can't hear every word.
My apologies. I don't know what the reason might be. Is that better? I'm standing.
That's a bit better.
Okay, I'll sit where I am. The other point that I wanted to make was the front fence. I think is a very important part of this proposal. The fence will, and I'm not saying this should be the function of a fence, but you will not see the view of the elevation that we're looking at here, elevation 1, from the street. So you might be, if you're on the footpath looking in over the fence, which you'll be able to look in over the fence. But if you're driving past or you're on the other side of the road, you'll see this dwelling in context with the landscaping, the front yard, and the fence. So that's the view that you will see. Thank you. The streetscape elevation, I think, is a very good point I'm trying to make. Look, can I just finish, perhaps? I hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
I think it is relevant, and often I wouldn't make this comment because it often is not relevant. But it struck me as important and relevant that none of the neighbours have shown any opposition to this at all. That tells me that the neighbours are quite comfortable with a dwelling such as this next door to them or across the road from them. Had they had concerns, it's always been my experience that a neighbour or neighbours will express their concerns one way or the other through the process that's been made available to them. You haven't received any representations. I think that's very telling.
Thank you. Emma.
Sorry, I suppose I should have been clear with my question, and it's getting late, I suppose. Does it have to be a double garage? Is there scope for the homeowner to consider a narrower garage?
I don't think there is, but the homeowner, Adriana, is before you. Adriana, would you like to comment on that? She may not be there. I thought she was.
No, she's there, but she's there. She's taken herself off mute, but it's not coming through.
Well, look, I think she has a desire. I won't say a requirement, but it's certainly a strong desire for her. I suppose the alternative would be to have a single garage and rank 2 vehicles, one behind the other. Again, the problem with that option is the depth of this allotment. It simply doesn't allow 2 cars to be ranked one behind the other. I think the solution that she's come up with is perfectly acceptable. You could add a column in the middle of the garage, as was done originally, and perhaps stagger the garage facade. that would be another way of doing it if that would help. And that was the original, well, part of one of the original proposals was being looked at. So in other words, a staggered garage, 2 cars side by side with a central column and one garage perhaps half a metre behind the other. Now there'd be a requirement there to redesign the dwelling, but I have seen an earlier design showing exactly that configuration. If that would help, I'm more than happy to go back to my client and the designer to come back with an amended design.
Brenton, I've just asked Adriana via the chat if she had anything she wanted me to say on her behalf. Yep. Do you want me to read that out?
Yes, please. That would be great, Lily.
Yep. So she's just said that there are many double garages in the street and the adjoining streets. Thank you. So that's her.
No problems. Thank you, Adriana.
Words on that.
Okay. Any further questions of, well, Adriana by chat or Graham by discussion? If not, thank you very much for your time. You'll go on mute now while we have some discussions, but you'll be able to hear the discussions as they go along.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Panel members, we've heard from the applicant. We've got a recommendation from staff for refusal. Do you need any clarification from staff? Any questions? Any discussion you would like to have?
Hello. Look, I wouldn't have an issue with the property being in line, sort of pretty much where the existing dwelling was. So, I mean, that's not a sticking point. But look, I'm really happy to just keep with the recommendation of council. I just don't think it's quite right.
Are you moving? Do you want discussion at this stage? And we take
discussion. I'm happy to move though as well. I don't mind.
Can I make a comment or two first?
Yes.
Go for it, Michael.
Yeah, I think, and thanks, Graham in particular, for explaining the background or some of the details. I think you started off by saying that the allotment is irregular in shape, and that is correct. And I guess I think part of the concern is that the dwelling design is relatively regular and conventional, and maybe doesn't respond to the particular site conditions. Saying that, I also recognise that there's probably been quite a lot of attempts to make the building and the facade and the fence fit in as much as possible. I do think that the double garage, as it's currently presented, is a challenge. And I don't see that the street has many other double garages. There might be one or two, but I wouldn't say that's part of the streetscape character. I do think that the concept of having an alternative to garage design might well be something worth considering, such as 2 single doors and a further staggering of the front of the garage. And looking at the floor plan, it does appear that there could be space to do that potentially with the plan. And also just reiterating the point about the roof design and colour, and I'd suggest that monument roofs, while very contemporary, is not really going to fit in all that easily, and the dark roof combined with the double garage probably would make the overall appearance not consistent. But I don't have a problem with the positioning of the building generally. I think there's some irregularity with the front building lines of other dwellings in the street. And my view is that perhaps with some further refinement, the proposal could be acceptable, particularly focused around the garage design and the roof design / colour.
Colleen, did you want to add anything?
I agree with both Michael and Emma on this, and I have a great deal of sympathy for the applicant because it's a very difficult site, and there isn't really that much room to accommodate a house this big. You know, this is a big house. even my dog looked at the pet room and thought that was pretty good, but it's a big house. However, I think it's possible, and sadly what we see before us at the moment isn't, I don't think, is the best solution. The garage being set back only a metre, in looking at this, you know, the setback would really not be particularly obvious. And I think that staggering it or adding a centre post or changing the roof line in some way so that minimises the garage, which really is practically the same width as the front two rooms. So look, it's practically half the width of the dwelling. That the original house that's been demolished was forward of the house to the west. Thank you for that, Graham. I think that was a good observation. But this will be much further forward again than that. So I think that it should be set back a little. And I think the style of it, the lack of a sort of porch at the front, the double garages, certainly the tall windows, which will be visible above the fence. I think it's just a lost opportunity to do something that is more sympathetic for the neighbourhood and which will look better in the neighbourhood. So I support the recommendation for refusal. But we
haven't got one yet, but we're about to.
Oh, we don't, but I'm but saying other than Brenton's comments,
no,
yes, look, you can leave me ready to propose that motion.
Well, off you go, Emma.
I suppose it sounds like we're all in favour of the recommendation, but I just wanted to just reach out to the property owner and say, please, if this is refused, don't give up hope, because Angus Street has had 2 property sales recently of over $2 million. Like, it's you know, if she does something well, it's going to repay her in spades. So it's, you know, it's a very popular street.
That's not a planning matter that we'll be discussing tonight. But that's something for the neighbour or the owner to be aware of. Before we take a motion, I would probably lean towards a deferral rather than a refusal at this point in time, is my gut feel. I'm not unhappy with the setback, given I've got an EMAP open and I can see the setback of the original house that was on site. I know that was a lot further forward to what number 20 is at the moment, and I think that it's probably reasonable. Again, sharing Michael's comments, I really still have concerns about the double garage, the roof treatment to the double garage, and if there was an opportunity for modifications to the design to actually rectify some of those issues, I would feel more comfortable. Without those changes, I would be supporting the staff's recommendation for refusal. So I suppose I'm open to more challenges, but I will see how the motions fall out. So we've had a foreshadowed motion for refusal. I'll put it back to the panel now. I'm happy to take the motion.
I would move a motion for deferral, Brenton, so that those design matters, including the front facade treatment, including a front porch and entry, the double garage treatment and the roof colour treatment are reconsidered.
Do we have a second of that motion? Colleen, prepared to second that motion? Yeah. Andrew and Lily, you've been busy sort of scribbling in the background, and this is also, I suppose what we're saying is that there is, the site should accommodate a dwelling. We agree with that. There are some design issues associated with this. Our job is not to redesign, but we're highlighting the fact that there is concerns in relation to double garaging, the materials and finishes of the roof, and recognising this is a conservation zone as well. So those elements are very important in terms of the streetscape appearance and character of the area.
I'm happy with that, what you said.
I think the colour of the roof was specifically mentioned.
Yes.
And I think the four reasons for the four original reasons for refusal, 5 reasons, can also be included in that reasons for deferral. So the siting and the dwelling not.
I think what we're doing is we're providing. We are raising severe reservations about the current design.
Mm-hmm.
That there may be opportunities for some minor changes to improve the design. Should they not be able to be resolved, then I think that the applicant and the representative have heard the discussions that have occurred tonight. Yeah. Or the applicant, I should say.
I think, can we add to that motion that the front entry treatment, such as a porch, I think that was by Colleen, and I think that would be important to consider.
That would really help, I think, those sorts of elements. It's that streetscape frontage is the concern to me. Does that capture the views of panel members? It's appearing before us at the moment.
Okay with me.
Yeah, I like that it gives the applicant a chance to make some tweaks and bring it back.
Yep.
And depending on what comes back, if it's similar to what we've got tonight, I think it's there's been some clear guidance provided. See what comes back. So we have a motion for deferral, been moved and seconded. If there's any discussion in relation to the motion, if not, put the motion. All those in favour for deferral? That's carried unanimously. So Graham and Adriana, you've got a little bit of work to do. It's not out of the question, but there's work to do. Thank you for your time tonight. Okay, we now move on to the next item, which is item 5 on our agenda. And I'll give Lily a chance to remove people and add people.
I'm going to be removed for this item.
Yes. So we'll just wait until the gallery who's involved comes in. Oh, there's nobody here.
Nobody
so
for this one, but I'll just take everybody out of this one. And all right.
So Michael, you have a conflict of interest on items 5 and 6.
Yeah.
So you get to go and check on the Olympics, and we'll call you when we're done.
Make a cup of tea.
Okay.
Michael's now gone. So item 5 of our agenda is 631 South Road, Everard Park. This is for a tree, a regulated tree, and the recommendation is for refusal. And my agenda has disappeared on me. As I said, we have a motion for refusal. We have nobody who wished to be heard in relation to this application. Over to panel members. What's your thoughts?
I'm happy to move as recommended. I mean, I base this decision on the arborist assessment. So I'm happy to move it as.
And I'm happy to second it. I respect the applicant. They're keeping the tree well maintained, but those gum nuts are wretched. And the lifting pavers is a matter of concern, and I appreciate that it limits access to the units to the north. But I've read carefully the arborist report, and I think at this stage the problems are still manageable. The gum nuts can be swept up, and the pavers, if they pop up, can be relaid easily. And I think, the tree looks very well still. And I was wondering whether it would suffer during last week's storm and tempest, but it's all there, still in place. And I think I would support the recommendation because, it's not affecting the building. It's not showing any likelihood of losing limbs or anything. And its removal will stop the corridor of eucalypts that's coming from the east, and I think that would be a pity. I think that it would be reasonable for us to reconsider this in 18 months or 2 years, but I support the recommendation for refusal.
I don't think the applicants put up their best case on this either. It's probably the best way to describe it. You know, I think the concerns about the gum nuts, I think, is legitimate, but they really just haven't put a strong argument that has helped to sway me at this point in time. So I think I agree with everything that Colleen just said. So we have a move? No, we haven't got a mover and a seconder yet. We have got a mover and a seconder. Yes, we've got Emma and Colleen has moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, I'll put the motion, which is for refusal. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. So that deals with item 5 on our agenda. Item 6 on the agenda is rules would present the croquet club. Do we have anyone in the gallery for this one, Lily?
No, so I haven't heard from Terence Crawford, and Brooke was not to be speaking, who was the other one. But
and we have David Brown here for answering questions if need be. Welcome, David. We may not have questions for you. I'll put it to the our panel members. Do you wish to hear from David at all?
No.
No. Any comments, questions? If not, happy to move the motion. Or make any comments about the application. I jumped.
That's right. Do you want to go first, Emma?
No, I was going to say I've butted in.
Well, I think this is delightful. I think despite the representative's suggestion that it lacks architectural aesthetic value, I think that he's completely wrong, and I think it's been very carefully and very thoroughly resolved. And it's entirely referential to the existing clubhouse. I had a look at their Facebook page, and there are delightful photos of the clubhouse, and the new one will just sit very nicely. I also think that locating it within the centre of the site, where you can see all 3 pictures from the building, is ideal, and also it reduces this safety issue with the car park being internal. I'm disappointed about the loss of the jacaranda, but that's always going to happen, and I can appreciate that the greensmen for the bowling green will be thrilled that the jacaranda is going. And I just think it's really nicely resolved. It's well done, and so I would propose the motion for acceptance.
We have a seconder. Emma's put her hand up very quickly. Done. We have a mover and a second.
I'm happy to second, but I'm also happy to second.
Brenton, could I just interrupt for a sec?
Sorry, yep.
Sorry, I did mean to say that we have updated condition 5 on the recommendation, and it's up on the screen for you. The basic update on that was that we were a little bit more specific about where we wanted the trenching to occur, and instead of the tree protection zone, we said the structural root zone as well. So there's a couple of changes. Have you got the right one in there, Ellie? I'll just eat it. I sent it to you. Go back in here.
Well, while you were adding that, fire away, Emma.
Okay. Look, as with Colleen, I think it's fine. I don't have any issue with it. The only sort of thing that I suppose concern I had, and it's very minor, is what the bowls club will be looking at is that long wall, and I'm just worried that will be, you know, is there any way that could be greened or something? Just because I'm just concerned in that location about graffiti, and if it becomes an eyesore, you know, I don't know if that's necessarily a planning thing, but I suppose I just wanted to flag it. That was probably the only thing that was.
Council organised for a graffiti artist to paint croquet, something nice on there.
Well, that's what I was wondering. You know, whether there could be something that's suitable to the bowls club or whatever. But yeah, anyway, that was the only concern I suppose I had. Yeah.
I do have one quick question. I apologise, I should have picked it up. In the application plans, we had a scenario 1 and a scenario 2 about a future expansion potential. And it's always very costly if you go back and retrofit something after the event. The 58 square metres for the members area, as proposed, is sufficient to meet the needs. There's no need to be looking at the scenario 2 at this point in time. Just to clarify that one, David, that might be a question for you.
Yes, it would be. There's budgetary constraints essentially, but what we've endeavoured to do is to design a building that can function in the larger form, and we are hoping that through the club and maybe the state government will get some grant money to assist with going for the larger option, which will be a future variation to this planning consent. It's a question of whether or not we can achieve it before we start work or not. We're hoping to. When you're right, that would make it much more efficient or cost efficient to do it at the start. But if not, it's a fairly simple alteration and addition to achieve the larger form if needs be.
And the extended toilet facilities and everything like that meets the larger form, so there's no issues there.
Yeah, it's all been designed for that larger capacity, and that whole core area doesn't have to change to facilitate that extension.
I hope you get your extra money.
Yeah.
We've got all our fingers crossed, yes. So has the club.
David, can I just ask if you get the money, does that change the elevation, the profile, or does the extension fit out under what is now the existing veranda?
Well, if you're looking at the elevation, it's designed in this double pavilion form.
Yep.
What will happen, of course, is with the Western Pavilion, which is the members area, as a bigger building, as a bigger floor space, the roof pitches will be the same, but it will be a larger gable because of the floor area. So it's same essential form, but that pavilion will be slightly larger in that north-south elevation.
But with that little bite out of the corner, I don't think that's that window in the corner. I think that, if that's a little bit bigger, that's not going to detract from the building in any way. So
no, there will be more glazing on the sides, or those front corners. And in, I guess these pavilions are both small. It'll be a bigger pavilion. I think it actually looks better balanced, actually, with the slightly bigger pavilion on that end.
So we're radiating positive thoughts for more money.
Good luck with your money.
Yes.
Thank you for that, David. Is there any further questions? We do have a mover and a seconder. Did I get that? No, we don't yet.
Can we just, Lily, can you just scroll back to that, the change in condition 5? Thank you.
So basically greater protection for the tree.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Based on that amendment,
yes.
Who's prepared to move and second?
I'll move.
Colleen's moving. Emma, are you seconding?
You can if you like. Otherwise, I'm happy to.
Your name's down. Done.
All right. I'm happy with that.
Any discussion? If not, I'll put the motion for approval. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Well done, David. Hope you get your extra money.
Thank you.
Good luck. Okay, we now have to get Michael back.
Is David from the council?
Yes.
Yes.
It's elections coming up, so if they're going to get funding, it's the time to do it.
Absolutely. Well done.
Brenton, just a reminder about the pushing back the confidential item.
I was just about to do that.
Okay.
So
sorry.
You've beaten me to it. We do have item 7 on our agenda, but Don has suggested that prior to considering item 7, that we deal with the normal matters in the agenda at the front, which is any other business and any matters for council's consideration while we're still in a public gallery. And then subject to that, then we can look into going to the confidential motion, item 7. So is there any other business that members wish to raise? I will. I think compliments to staff to actually get this working tonight have done a brilliant job. So well done. It doesn't have to be put into other business, but you have done a really good job. Any matters for council's consideration?
Nope.
No? Good. Okay. So now we go into item 7. And before we do that, we have my agenda's disappeared on my iPad again.
How to stop recording? Okay, I've got it.
Oh, yeah, have to stop recording. So we have a recommendation to go into confidence. Anyone prepared to move that one?
Nope.
Colleen, and did Emma put her hand up?
No,
I
but
see
I
your hand.
can.
There we go.